Hello, my name is Wayne Russell. I am the owner and founder of Maritime Wilderness Skills in New Brunswick, Canada. What I do is I teach survival and bushcraft skills in New Brunswick on the Atlantic East Coast. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over a few fire starters that I teach in my wilderness survival course and the second level, which is the intermediate. First off, we're going to start with the store-bought fire starters. These are great to throw in a survival kit because you don't have to look for them. They're there when you need them. When you're looking for a fire starter, you want something that's going to last minutes while it burns. That allows the heat to dry out any moderately damp material to have better success with fire. So in my initial wilderness survival course, I teach with these, lighten them with a lighter. Most people can buy these. They can buy a disposable lighter or a box of wooden matches, and these will light right up. What I'm going to do is show you how to light one of these and how you'd process it to light it with a ferrocerium rod. Now, I would only use one of these pieces, and I have actually cut it into halves and used that. But what I want to do is I just want to fluff this up. Get some nice fine fluff on here that the spark can catch. Something like that there. Now what I'm going to do is press my ferro rod right against it and produce sparks into that area. And now we'll see how quickly you can ignite that if it's processed properly. Now you could have taken a lighter and lit it right up with a lighter. So much easier without much processing. So as you've seen, the boughten fire starters light really well if processed a little bit, fluffed up with a ferro rod. But they light up just as easy, if not easier, with a flame source, saying it being a match or disposable lighter. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share some natural tinders or natural fire starters that I share in my intermediate course. This would be the next level of fire starting. For resin, a wonderful fire starter. This tree here is a balsam fir, and inside these little blisters there is a resin that is a great fire starter. Now this can be used year-round in any weather to start fire. I'm going to show you a technique that I came up with to collect this easily, and it makes it a very viable fire starter in our New Brunswick woods. So what I have here is a piece of wood here about 8 inches by an inch, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to carve this down and my plan is to carve that down until it's in the center. That's going to make it the widest. I'm going to carve that and show you what it looks like afterward. This is what it looks like here, and I'm going to show you how this works. I said this works great in my New Brunswick forest, but this works anywhere there's balsam fir. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in under a blister, push it firmly against the tree and scoop up, allowing for the sap to run on this little spoon type of device, whatever you want to call it. But it will start gathering the sap on here, and you'll see that some of the bark of the blister will be on there as well, but that burns too, so you leave it on there. I'm going to collect a little bit, and then we're going to light it up. Some blisters produce better than others, but that was only 4 or 5 blisters thus far, and we just need a few more. Got a few more here. What I look for is the larger blisters, because that means it's going to have more resin in it. Not every tree you find has many blisters. So usually you can find blisters on balsam fir, and some have more than others. But right now we have enough for a fire. When I created this method of collecting resin to make it a good fire starter, because it's easy to collect and you can collect lots fast. Now, I named this the resin stick because it's a stick full of resin. I also flatten out the end nice and flat so it fits nice and flat against the tree. When you scrape it up, you lose less resin. Now, I created this that I can step on this portion like this, turn it around where I want it. I can plant my ferro rod and drive sparks down into it. So that's what I'm going to do and light this up. A resin stick. That's one of my go-to natural fire starters. Now what I'm going to do is show you another natural fire starter, and it's another resin. I'm going to harvest this right here and look at it. What I'm looking for is resin impregnated wood. Wood that has been filled up full of resin that I can use as a fire starter. I'm going to harvest a few of these, and then we will go over the processing and how to light a fire with it. I am not sure if there's any fat wood in this until I cut it. That is what they call resin impregnated wood, is fat wood. Now you can buy that in stores nowadays, but it's usually pine fat wood. This is from a spruce tree. There is no fat wood in this, but what I'm looking for is right around where it hooks to the tree. I'm looking for resin build up on that branch. So what I'm looking for is a resin buildup along the branch like this. It's usually the lower branches that you're going to find fat wood, and a lot of times they'll be damaged, and that's why the tree sends its sap out to try to heal the branch. So we're going to cut this off, and I see that it's gumming up my teeth of my saw. So that's a good sign that there is fat wood here. You can see the color of the fat wood. It's real dark and red. A lot of times fat wood can be found in dead stumps and rotten trees and such as well. That has fat wood in it. So these are the sticks I harvested from the spruce tree. And this was a spruce root. And it's saturated with fat wood. I'm going to show you how to process this. I can use my scraper for my ferro rod. I can use my knife. There's many ways to process this, and I'm going to show you using my knife and with the ferro rod striker. Now first off, all this here is full of resin. So I'm going to keep that because that will burn for a long time. But you can see the resin on here as well. Now I can just carve little tiny shavings like this if I want to. You can see how sticky that is. But these fine little shavings are going to light up easy since they're saturated with the resin. You can also scrape like this, and you can see nice fine scrapings there that light up very easy. That's what I do a lot of times, is I'll use the sharp edge and get a nice little pile of those scrapings and light those up. You can take a flame source like a disposable lighter or match and just put it directly to this and it will light. Now what I'm going to do is just show you, you can scrape the fat wood like this as well as I was doing with my knife. And this makes very fine shavings. You can make it to almost like it's a dust. It's so fine. I'm going to make a nice little pile of that and light it up. Normally I may go a little bit more, but for demonstration, there you go. Next on the list has to be birch bark. Birch bark is just peeling off most of my trees around my area. This here does not damage the tree by taking off bark that is going to eventually fall off in the next windstorm. But a little bit of bark like this can be a great fire starter. Birch bark is a great fire starter. You can take a combustible device like, once again, disposable lighter or match, and put the flame directly to it and it'll light up. Now it takes a little bit more processing with a ferro rod, but you can tear it up and just keep showering sparks on it. It may catch the first spark, or it may catch the 50th or the 500th. You don't know. I like to do a method that I process it, plant my rod, shower it with sparks, and I find that it lights up way easier. Now I'll use my knife, or I can use my scraper and put it on a hard surface so I can scrape this nice and fine and try to get nice fine pieces of this bark. Some bark works better, I find, as well. This one's rather hard. I'll see if I can go this way. There we go. But I'm going to keep scraping this, as you see, until I make a hole right through the bark like this. That is key. Otherwise, you'll light it and they will just burn right off and you'd be done. But if you have a hole, then you can light these, turn it up, and let it climb up through the hole and catch. Fire always wants to climb, so make sure that you have your material up so it can climb. Otherwise, if you hold it like this, you light this, it's just going to burn off. You want to turn it and let it climb up through. I'm going to try to light that. Let's give this a try. A lot of times I will shower it like that. Now I've got that lit. I'm going to turn it right upside down like this and let it climb up through. So normally in my woods I have fir, I have spruce, I have birch bark, but I may not have in that area one of those species. That's why I find it important to have many fire starters that I can work with. Those tinders I can use year-round and in any weather conditions. That's why they're my go-tos. Lastly, I'm going to show you a fire starter that can work pretty much anywhere with pretty much any type of tree that will burn. That fire starter is dead wood. Now it doesn't matter the species as long as it is safe to burn and it is dead and dry. I'm going to show you how to process that to make it into a very good fire starter. So I want to split this piece of wood here. So I have this on a stone. This is not ideal. I usually do this on wood, but I don't have wood right here, so I've got to be very careful when I split this that I'm not going all the way down and hitting the stone, just because I don't want to damage my knife. But I did not hit the stone. You can see that it's nice and split. I'm going to do that again, and then the other piece as well. Now what I'm going to do is just make fine shavings. Very, very fine shavings. So you can do this with pretty much any piece of wood. You want to split it to get into the interior driest part of the wood, and that's going to light easier. But you can use some bigger ones, some smaller ones, but the finer, the easier it's going to be to light. Now with shavings, it can take 1 spark or it can take 50. It's all according. You got to get that right spark. Now the trick is, working on this rock is going to be difficult. It's going to want to move a little bit, and you don't want to knock your tinder away. So I'm going nice and easy here, as you see. So it's the just spraying it. and I keep knocking it over, so I'm going to try to pin it down. And we have flamage. So that there is just dead dry wood. You've seen how to prepare it and how to light it. Now you could do that as well with a combustible device. With an open flame, you can light that right up. With a ferro rod, it takes a little bit more processing, but it still works. So I want to thank you for watching. I really hope these tips help some folks, and take care, stay safe. All the best.
How's it, and welcome back. Today I'm going to go through my most essential survival gear, the stuff that I keep in my bag even if I'm just going out on a day hike. Promise I'm not adding a lot of weight to the bag here, but I am going to save you a lot of trouble in an emergency. I'm Clarice, welcome to the Live Ready channel. In this episode, I wanted to go through some of the equipment or the gear that I used in the Survival Skills Africa video. I've taken out basically my 10 most important items, things that I carry with me in the bush even if I'm just going on a little day hike. And this is really stuff that I find has multiple uses, so it replaces having to take a whole bunch of gear, so you can use some of these things for dual purposes. And things that I really think one should not be in the wilderness without. I am going to be posting a series of videos based on the Survival Skills Africa video, where I have grouped certain skills together for easy reference so that you can go and find the video on how to search for water in the wilderness, how to navigate, how to make a field compass, building shelters, different kinds of survival fires. So that you've got those for easy reference. And if you haven't managed to sit still through the entire hour-long video of survival skills, you've got the short version to go to. First on my list, and something I never even leave the house without, irrespective of where I'm going, is a water bottle. And preferably you'd want something that you can boil water in. So this is an aluminium canteen with a nesting cup. What I find really useful about this is you can cook in the nesting cup at the same time that you're actually boiling water. So this canteen cup has so many uses, and I've even used it as a hot water bottle at night when it's been really cold. So making hot water bottles forms part of your thermoregulation, especially in emergency shelters where you don't necessarily have your normal sleeping system with you. If you're traveling through really arid conditions, you might even want to keep multiple canteens. I really recommend this over a plastic bottle because you can actually use it to boil your water, whereas a plastic bottle, you're kind of dependent on filtering or purifying your water with either tablets or something else, where making a fire, boiling your water doesn't use any of your resources. The other function that a canteen cup has is that you can actually use it as a digging tool. Remember that being able to carry water with you is absolutely imperative, especially in dry environments. Water is so valuable because you don't know when the next time is going to be that you're going to come across that water. The other thing that these canteen cup combinations are great for is that you can actually use the pouch that they come with. In the Survival Skills Africa video, I was using a different pouch for my canteen cup. I think I've retired that one after that video. So I've moved on to the next one. And these are great because you can attach them to your belt. So you don't need to carry your water inside your bag. You can attach it separately to your belt. So if you're just going out foraging or collecting resources or firewood, you can just put it on your belt. You don't have to carry your entire bag with you from your campsite. These are also great as little pockets that you can forage or stack some eggs in, especially if you've had to climb a tree or you've been in like very precarious terrain and you're struggling to actually carry everything in your hands. It helps to have a little pouch that you can attach to your belt that you can put all of the things that you've gathered into. Another thing I usually keep in my bag is a water filtration system. So this is a Sawyer Mini. As it happens, it doesn't remove viruses from your water. It does, however, remove bacteria and protozoa, so it makes your water that much safer to drink. It's got a clean side and it's got a dirty side, and there's a really nice packet or a bag that attaches to it that I can collect water with and then drink straight from the water source. This is really important in instances where you, for example, don't have the opportunity to boil your water. Either you're in a really arid environment and you don't have the resources to make a fire, so having an option that you can filter and purify water on the go is really imperative. Not all water filtration systems on the market are made equal, so preferably get something that removes both bacteria and viruses and protozoa from your water, and that will give you the best option for water filtration. These are especially useful in very arid conditions where any water you find, even if you dig a seep well, is going to be really muddy. You'll want to remove a lot of the mud and the debris from your water, and you can do that through filtering it a couple of times in different ways. But taking that water, that muddy water, and boiling it is just going to give you a mouthful of sand. And it is going to reduce the lifespan of your water filtration system by putting really muddy water through it, but at least you'll be able to get some drinking water out of that. The other thing I highly recommend is keeping some paracord in your bag so that you can actually make a bow drill kit from that cord. It's really difficult to make cordage that's strong enough in a hurry in the wilderness in order to make a bow drill kit. So it really helps if you've got a bit of cordage. You can harvest it from your clothing if you need, but it's really great to just have something to build shelters with. And paracord is great because you can take the inner strands apart and the outer sleeve you can still use as cordage or as rope, while the inner parts can be used as tinder or to build traps or snares or things like that. So keep some paracord in your bag. It's really versatile. It will hang your gear off the ground. Not all paracords made equal though, so have different cordage in your bag. Something really strong and robust that you can build shelters or platforms off the ground with is also going to be of a whole lot of value to you in the wilderness. It also helps to have really strong cordage that you can hoist things up or down if you need to. From a really young age, I've gone camping, and I learned from a friend that one should always take a space blanket or a mylar blanket with you when you go camping. So I found a lot of value in putting a mylar blanket underneath my sleeping bag. It reflects my body heat back to me and it helps me to stay warm. So mylar blankets are quite versatile because they're basically plastic with a layer of silver on. And the idea is that they reflect your body heat back to you, but they are also super waterproof. So if you don't have a waterproof footprint to sleep on, maybe you've just taken a tarp or a poncho with you, and you don't have anything to form a ground sheet, you can use your mylar blanket. Mylar blankets are also really great to reflect heat back to you from the inside of your shelter, and they can be used as waterproofing for the inside of a shelter. So for example, if you're building a debris shelter but you're not managing to waterproof it sufficiently and you're expecting bad weather, then you can use the mylar blanket on the inside of your shelter to waterproof that even further. Because they're so shiny, they're also really great for reflecting light and signaling for help if you need to. Remember that if you've only got one mirror, but the help that you're seeking or you're trying to signal to is in the opposite direction of the sun, you're going to have a hard time reflecting the sun in that direction. You're basically only going to cast a shadow. So if you've got a signal mirror and you've got a mylar blanket secondly, then you can use the one to reflect light off the other. And mylar blankets, because they are so reflective, even being carried over you as a sun shield, can also reflect sunlight back and be a passive beacon for help that somebody might spot from the air or from far away. Because mylar blankets are waterproof, they can also be used to collect water, especially rainwater. So they are so lightweight and yet so versatile, it really is not worth leaving the house without a mylar blanket. So stick one in your bag. In fact, sometimes I even take two with me, then I've got the option of using one as a blanket while I'm sleeping on top of the other. Just remember, because they're so waterproof, they're not breathable, so you might end up with a bit of condensation on the inside of that mylar blanket. Something I found a lot of value in the wilderness is my silky saw. So this is a folding saw. It is a pull saw, not a push saw. So I can only grind through the wood when I'm pulling through the wood. You do get saws, folding saws that are push and pull saws. I believe the Bucko Laplander saws are push and pull saws. but at the rate that this saw grinds through wood, I honestly can recommend that it doesn't matter what folding saw you get, just get a folding saw. This is great for processing wood, for building traps, for building shelters. I've put this saw to really good use, and somebody made a good recommendation and said keep an extra blade with you in the wilderness so that if it breaks for whatever reason, you've got an extra blade. Because this is a high carbon steel saw, I can also use it to strike a flintstone if I need to get fire, and because it's got a 90-degree spine on it, it's also going to give me some really great sparks off of my ferro rod. Even if I, for whatever reason, don't have a knife, I can use my silky saw to start fire. Now, once again, you get folding knives that are multi-tools. They've got a saw on it and they've got a blade on it, and it feels like putting those two pieces of equipment in one piece of equipment is really a win. I actually can recommend keeping both pieces of equipment. Having two separate blades really is worthwhile. In the Survival Skills Africa video, I actually used a different knife than the one that I've got here. I've been using this Kabar knife in that video, and it needs a bit of TLC. It's been through the rigors, but this is a very nice knife as well. Remember, the longer the blade is, the more difficult it becomes to do finer carving tasks, and the easier it becomes to do more gross motor sort of hacking, and processing firewood is much easier with a longer blade. That's another disadvantage of the blade that you get on a multi-tool like a Victorinox knife. Because it's a really short blade, it becomes more difficult for you to process firewood, to baton things with that short blade. Whereas this knife, because it's got such a long, big blade, and it's such a robust knife, I can easily delimb trees and things like that with this knife. And there are many different knives on the market, so really try out different ones. Decide whether you like a Scandi gripe. Do you prefer a hunting knife? Do you prefer more a bushcrafty knife? What kind of grip or what kind of handle do you like on the knife? What kind of sheath do you like? These items are my personal ones, but you can substitute whatever you prefer in place of these items. I just really recommend you keep a saw, a fixed blade knife, a water filtration system, a ferro rod, but substitute whatever brand you like in here. Shelter is one of our most important survival priorities when we are in the wilderness, but we seldom actually carry a whole shelter system with us into the bush. Often we only want to carry something like a jacket, and personally I think that your clothing forms the first layer of your shelter. But in those instances where you don't have a whole shelter system, or you don't want to carry a tarp or a tent or a hammock or something with you, you're just going out for the day, at least carry something like a plastic bag that you could make a makeshift shelter out of. In a recent adventure into the bush, Indy and I got caught off guard. We checked the weather forecast, no rain forecast. This is the Western Cape, and suddenly there was rain. And instead of setting up a whole big shelter or rushing to build an emergency debris shelter, I simply used a plastic bag. Now this is quite a big plastic bag, so I fit into it sitting upright like this with my bag, and Indy, both of us fit into this plastic bag. So keeping something like a plain plastic bag, especially a clear one, is really worthwhile because you can make a shelter out of it. A clear plastic bag is also great to use as a transpiration bag. So you can take a clear plastic bag, put it over the branch of a tree, leave it in the sun for a couple of hours, and the leaves from that tree are going to transpire, and the byproduct of that is water. The water will get caught up in your bag and you've got some water. So in an environment where you're really struggling to find water, you can use a clear plastic bag as a transpiration bag. The other option that you have is to set up a solar still. Personally, I don't find transpiration bags or solar stills to yield a lot of water, but it is going to be absolute gold to you if you can't find any other water. Another item that I carry around with me in just about every bag that I've got is a ferro rod. So a lighter is great because a lighter gives you an instant flame, but the problem with a lighter is that first of all it's a depletable resource. You can go through lighter fluid quite quickly if you're constantly using it to make fire, whereas a ferro rod is something that's going to last for a very long time. So In the instance of a lighter, I would use a lighter for emergency fire making. If I really need to get a fire going quickly, let's say I'm trying to prevent hypothermia, I really need to make a fire very fast, or all of the materials in my environment are wet and I can't find any dry tinder that I can use a ferro rod quite easily to make fire with, I might then consider using a lighter instead of a ferro rod. But a ferro rod, because it's not depleted as easily, you can get many more fires from a ferro rod than you can with a lighter. It's good to keep a ferro rod as your primary option for fire making. In fact, if you're in a long-term survival situation, your bow drill kit would probably be your better option for your go-to fire making kit. And then a ferro rod, because it is still a depletable resource, it just takes much longer to deplete a ferro rod. You would use a ferro rod if, for whatever reason, you can't get a fire going with a bow drill kit. Maybe you're injured. You can start a fire if you're injured with a ferro rod. And if you're really in an emergency situation where you need to get a fire going instantly, that is when you will use your lighter. Now, of course, one does need to actually practice the skill of making fire with a ferro rod, making fire with a bow drill, and practice using different kinds of woods for making bow drill fires, because you will need to adjust your technique a little bit. If you've got a harder wood, you might need to drill first to accumulate quite a bit of sawdust and then only try to ignite that sawdust thereafter. Whereas if you've got a very soft wood, you might be able to drill, get sawdust and light it into an ember all in one go. The same goes for ferro rod fire making. You want to practice that skill and have that skill down before you get into a situation where you really need to use a ferro rod for fire making. Now, this is not a flint, this is a ferro rod. It is a man-made material, whereas flint stone is usually a stone that you'll find in a riverbed or lying around, and that's just basically going around taking something like a high carbon steel striker, trying out different kinds of stones and using those stones then to light tinder or to ignite something like punkwood. Whereas a ferro rod, you would take your knife, the spine of your knife, and scrape along the ferro rod and generate sparks off of that ferro rod. So there is a difference between a ferro rod and a flint. The other thing that's really nice about my Kabar knife, about the BK62 knife, is because it is also a high carbon steel, I can use that to generate sparks from a flint stone. So you can go around the bush and just try using a high carbon steel knife, try using your silky saw, try using a carbon striker or a high carbon steel striker, and see what you can get sparks off of in the bush. So a compass is not something that I actually use very often in the wilderness, but for the case where you are lost, which I have been in the wilderness, it is really valuable to be able to tell direction with a compass. You can put a stick in the ground and you can tell the direction from the stick in the ground method, but you need the sun for that, and the weather is not always that reliable, so if you can't see the sun, then you may have a bit of trouble actually determining direction with the stick in the ground method. The other option that you have is an analog watch, but once again you need to be able to determine where the sun is to use an analog watch as a compass. Should you not have either a compass or an analog watch available to you to determine direction, you can magnetize a needle using your knife, or a bobby pin, something like a safety pin, can be used in order to magnetize that needle. I somewhere put it inside my canteen cup, floated in a little bit of water on a leaf, and just scraping one half of that needle is going to magnetize it, and that will determine direction. In the instance where you really are in a survival situation and you're probably dehydrated, possibly hypoglycemic, you're not functioning or thinking clearly anymore, having something as clear cut as a compass that shows north is in this direction is going to be helpful in keeping you from traveling in circles. You can also use it to shoot an azimuth on your map and to figure out where you went wrong in the first place. So it really is worthwhile just having a compass in your bag, even if it's a small button compass or something like one of those you get those survival bracelets that's got like a little tiny button compass and a bit of paracord. That's actually really useful to have something like that with you. Now that's most of the gear that I have in my bag, but there are a couple of other things that I really recommend you keep with you. Something that didn't even make it out of my bag in the Survival Skills Africa video was my medical kit. Even though it doesn't come out that often, I honestly recommend that you keep a decent medical kit in your bag for those emergencies where you need to dress a wound, maybe you've accidentally cut yourself, and make sure that it's got 2 tourniquets in it, preferably windlass tourniquets because they're the most effective. So not to be underestimated, that time that you really need this medical kit, you're going to be so grateful that you've got it. You can also use a tea candle or even just the wick of a tea candle to warm yourself up or to get a fire going. So if you can't make fire with a ferro rod really easily, or you're struggling to get a bodrel fire going, and you do need to use your lighter, but you don't want to waste the lighter gas that's in there, you can light the wick of the candle. So you use less lighter gas doing that, but you've still got a burning candle that you can continue either drying tinder with or just igniting a fire. I've also used a tea candle in order to manage the effects of hypothermia, of exposure. Along with my space blanket, you just light the tea candle underneath a blanket, whether it's a space blanket or a wool blanket or even just a jacket or whatever kind of covering you can find. It just creates a pocket of air that you can warm up using that little tea candle, using that wick, and that will warm the air around you and help you to prevent hypothermia. I'm going to post the links to all of these items in the description to this video. You can also check out the Live Ready website. There are a couple of gear tabs there that you can go shop around on. Well, that's it from me on survival gear. If you haven't yet, go and check out the Survival Skills Africa video for a consolidated video on all survival skills where I've put this stuff to really good use. Drop a comment below, let me know where you're watching from, and until the next time, live ready.